bad boys, what you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. Oh, hey there. Welcome back for another episode of Form Check Friday. Not cops. Anyways, guys, let's get right down to it. First video here comes from Frosted Zero. Didn't really get a real name, so that's what we're gonna go with. But as you can see here, we're doing some squats. Now, the biggest thing I'm seeing with, I don't even know, Frost, we'll call him Frost, is we're just really not doing a good job of bracing the trunk. So as he hits the bottom, you can see everything kind of like rolls in this way, and as he gets up to the top, he's actually struggling to get his back extended and get stood up properly again because of how much he gets compromised in the bottom. So the biggest thing I want you to try to do is I want you to really try to maintain that lat tension and the tension, keeping your shoulders back and keeping your back extended and neutral throughout the lift, especially as you get into the bottom position. Some pause squats, some tempo squats, pin squats. I know I say this stuff all the time, but I think it bears, I think it's worth repeating. So let's work on some of that stuff. Let's work on maintaining and keeping tension through that upper back, mid back, low back, etc. Just maintaining position as you get into the bottom of the squat there, I think is gonna go a long, long ways. Next up, we have a couple submissions from Ishmael, I'm not sure how to pronounce that properly, but anyways, he's from Turkey, and we have some squat and some deadlift here.
He likes to be real cool. They both like to be real cool.
Soccer bopper, you can soccer.
There it goes. Anyways, so first off, we're gonna take a look at his deadlift here. Now the deadlift, to me, actually everything looks really good. It looks like we might have a little bit of the hips creeping up sort of as he initiates the pull. Tiny little bit of loss of positioning, but this also looks like it's near maximal load. So doing a good job of keeping the back extended, keeping everything in good position there. With the squat though, one thing I'm noticing, or one thing that I see here, is it looks like you might be a little bit overextended. So right as you sit, as you initiate sitting into the squat, it looks like we're putting almost a little bit too much extension through the back. So I think thinking about the cue of keeping your ribs locked down on top of your abs a little bit more would go a long ways. It looks like as a result of being overextended, you're a little bit too far back on the heels perhaps. So let's try and keep that weight a little bit more mid-foot, keep the ribs locked down, and try not to drive your chest out quite as hard on these squats. And your bench, Ishmael, looks pretty damn good. Aside from it being touch and go, as always, I would recommend pausing the benches. But bench technique and movement and everything like that looks great, so I wouldn't change much of that. Next up, we got a video all the way from Baton Rouge from Caleb. From Caleb. Now, Caleb sent me two different videos. His first video came in, and it was a front angle of some pause deadlifts, and everything looked pretty flawless from that angle. When I took a look at the side angle, however, I'm noticing that he's got a little bit of posterior pelvic tilt, meaning his pelvis is kind of ducked under him that way. So a lot of times it looks like a loss of extension in the low back. And I think to an extent it is, but one of the things that I get people to do to try and figure this out is our cat-cow exercise, just to try and feel out different pelvic tilts. So what we would want is a little bit of anterior pelvic tilt, meaning his butt kind of arched out behind him a little bit better, because I think that's going to be one of the biggest things with Caleb's deadlift here. Now, when you are in posterior pelvic tilt, or your butt is rounded underneath you, it makes it a little bit harder to leverage your glutes and your hamstrings as you should, and it puts us in that same position we end up in when we lose back extension. So it looks like most of Caleb's back is well extended and in good position, but it's just that very, very bottom junction. His hips are kind of tucked under him a little bit. So that's the biggest thing I would try to work on, Caleb, is trying to get that little bit of anterior pelvic tilt, that little bit of a natural arch to your low back. And I think that'll go a long ways in not only protecting your back, but giving you a little bit better leverage throughout the lift. And now we have a video from Josue. All right, next up we got a video from Jay. We're just gonna call him Jay because I can't pronounce his first name properly. Tried a couple times, didn't work. All right, so Jay is doing some squats here. Now we can see when Jay starts the squat, it looks to me like his feet, like his stance might be a little bit wider than what's comfortable. So right as he gets to the sticking point, we're getting a tiny little bit of valgus knee crash or inward knee crash. And I think that's one of the reasons he's hitting that sticking point so hard. The other thing is it looks like right as he gets to the bottom, everything loosens up. He's trying to rely a little bit too much on that stretch reflex. So I would say a little bit more patience, and like I was saying earlier, a little bit more tightness in the hold. Just like I was saying to Frost, whose name we don't even have. Try a little bit harder to keep that trunk braced and that back braced against the bar so that when we hit the bottom, we're not crumpling or squishing. And as well, like I said earlier, pause squats, tempo squats, pin squats, all very valuable in teaching yourself to maintain that positioning. And lastly, we have some videos from
For you! Side. Now lift and lift. Side.
Anthony. And Anthony sent in some deadlifts. First thing we notice right here, you can see this is in a meet, and he's just not really packed in there tightly at all. So as soon as he initiates the lift, we see he kind of hips come up and he rounds forward, back goes out of position. He manages to lock it out. It's all well and good, but I think it would go a long ways if you could leverage yourself against the bar, use your lats to pull yourself in a little bit better, pull the slack out of the bar, etc., etc. I talked a little bit about this last week in a little bit more detail, so maybe check that episode out. Now the other thing Anthony was somewhat concerned about was the amount of forward lean he has, and you can see in his squat here, we're pretty lean forward. One of the reasons I think that is because we're not allowing the knees to travel forward enough. I think, Anthony, if you were to narrow your stance just a tiny bit, and allow your knees to travel forward a little more, as well as keep them forward over your toes as you initiated the drive out of the bottom, I think that would go a long ways to keeping you a little bit more upright. Now he does mention that he has some knee pain that is, in his opinion, contributing to that forward lean. So that might be exactly what's happening, is he's trying not to put pressure through those quads as much. So you might need some manual therapy or a more in-depth look at your technique, some trial and error, etc., to try and get rid of that knee pain before you're able to use some of these cues. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing in terms of keeping you a little bit more upright, is a little bit more forward knee travel, a little bit more keeping the knees forward. As you can see, as he initiates the squat out of the bottom, everything kind of shoots back, even if just an inch or two. But that's again going to push your hips up back behind you and contribute to that squat morning kind of pattern. Other than that, I think everything looks really good. Anyways, guys, that's it for Form Check Friday. Please keep sending in submissions in. We're very happy to take a look at everything that we can. We are up to about June 12th at this point. So if you've sent in submissions and you haven't gotten an email or been featured on the channel yet, we are just making our way through stuff. We're not quite as far behind as we once were, but I'm sure we will start seeing a lot more submissions soon, and we'll probably get buried again. But thanks to everybody who's submitted. Thanks to everybody who watches. Thanks to everybody who's purchased clothing in the last little while. We came out with a lot of new stuff and people seem to really like it, so that's awesome. Thank you so much for the support. Leave a like, comment below if you have any questions. Hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys next time.